A lot of people in our society today are poor not because they are not making enough money. They are actually poor because they have wrong financial habits. In terms of wealth creation, in terms of creating financial independence, it is very imperative that we actually have what I call a positive habit. In terms of wealth creation also, habit actually plays what I call a predominant role. The question now is, what is actually habit? When you're talking about habits are actually routine behaviors or actions that is performed on regular basis, and in most cases they are usually performed unconsciously. Now I'm going to be talking about 7 habits that will actually keep a lot of people poor in our society. Don't forget that we are actually in a capitalist system or a free market economy where the gap between the rich and the poor is always very large. The rich are making money every day, but unfortunately for the poor, they are getting poorer every day. And that is why this video is going to expose those habits that we actually inhibit in our lives and also prevent us from making money. If we actually stop this habit today, or we actually take some concise actions regarding this habit, there is every possibility that we are going to be very rich. Number one habit that make people to be very poor is what I call thinking the system will take better care of them. We are actually in a free market economy system, and unfortunately in this system, a lot of people still believe that it is actually the responsibility of the government to take care of them. I am not saying that it is not the duty of the government or it is not the responsibility of the government to cater for the citizens. But unfortunately, this scenario or this situation has actually made a lot of people to be very, very lazy. They expect everything from the government. I could remember one of the former presidents in America actually said something that don't wait for what the government can do for you. In other words, it's actually a clear call that people should take responsibility for their lives as opposed to waiting for the government for everything in their lives. Though sometimes there is a need for government to provide assistance to the people that can actually alleviate or reduce poverty in the society, but on the other end too, the people should not expect everything from the government. If you want to be financially free, if you don't want to depend on the government, if you want to have what I call financial independence, then it is imperative that you need to take a concise action rather than relying on the government for everything. If you want to be rich, if you want to be financially stable, if you want financial independence, then you do not need to depend on the government every time, because depending on the government will actually make you to stay broke. Depending on the government will actually make you to be lazy. Depending on the government will actually make you to be retrospective. Depending on the government will not build you up financially. Number 2 habit that makes people to be poor is buying what you can qualify for and not what you can actually afford. Now, a lot of companies in our society today, because we are actually adopting a capitalist economic system, offer services like buy now, pay later, easy buy, and all these credit facilities. In most cases, people go for these credit facilities and they believe that when they have a credit score or higher credit scores, they are making themselves to be very, very rich. But statistics has actually proven that this notion, this idea is actually totally wrong. So these companies actually offer buy now, easy buy, and the rest of them. Then you need to ask yourself, what is actually the basis behind these offers that are actually given to the citizens in the society. Don't forget, we are actually in a capitalist economy, and the sole reasons for a business owner to go into business activities is actually to make profit. Buy now, pay later, and easy buy has actually made it very easy for people to actually buy things and pay on instrumental basis. You see, the more you buy, the more you actually qualify. In a society where people actually qualify for all these things, and when you actually pay up in good time, you actually have what I call a good credit score. So when you actually go for easy buy, when you go for buy now pay later, you need to understand one thing, that you're actually making somebody out there to be very rich. They are making surplus value at your own expense due to your lack of financial education. Apart from the fact that a lot of people actually entertain, or they go for easy buy, buy now and pay later, there is something that actually takes place when you actually default in paying your money. It is what I call being slapped with a penalty when you actually default. Every default comes with a penalty, and in most cases, the penalties are always very, very high. Have you ever wondered how much you are spending every year on buy now and pay later, easy buy, and the rest of them? You are actually making somebody to be very rich. You are actually creating wealth to somebody, and that's why some of them can fly on first class planes from one country to another, because you are actually making them to be very, very rich. You need to understand one thing, that if the product does not put money in your pocket, you don't need to finance it. Also, any product that you cannot buy with your money, you don't need to finance it. Any product that you cannot provide what I call cash for, then you don't need to finance such a product. Because when you actually finance those products, you are creating a hole in your pocket, and you are actually making other people to be very, very, very rich. You need to buy those things with your cash instead of easy buy, buy now, pay later, or with your credit card. Because if you are doing that, you are actually making somebody out there to be very, very rich. Number 3 habit that makes people to be very poor in our society is rewarding themselves for being broke. You need to actually avoid spending the money that you don't have. This is the scenario in our society where people actually spend the money they don't have, and when the money actually comes, the money is already spent. In other words, when the money comes, they use that money to settle for their debts. You don't need to spend the money you don't have. And you ask me, how do people actually spend the money they don't have? They spend the money they don't have when they go for easy buy, when they go for buy now pay later, and when they go for those credit facilities, or when they go for these loans. When you actually go for these things, you are actually paying a lot of money. Right now in Nigeria, if you want to borrow money from a bank, you are going to pay about 34 to 38% interest on the money you are going to borrow. Imagine paying 34 to 38% as an interest for the money you want to borrow. That's a very huge amount of money. At the end of the day, that money, if it is not for a commercial purpose, that money, if it is not going to yield anything at the end of the day, you may end up regretting ever collecting that money, because you are going to pay heavily at the end of the day. So by the time you calculate the amount of money you are actually giving out as a freebie to the easy buy, buy now, pay later credit facilities at the end of them, you are going to realize that you are actually making other people to be very, very rich. When you are actually going through tough times, when you are actually going through tough financial situations, or when you find yourself in what I call financial danger zone, it is not actually the time to reward yourself. It is not actually the time to spend a lot of money, because in most cases people will always say, I cannot kill myself. That is, I cannot kill myself because I'm actually in a financial situation. Rather, let me enjoy myself and spend that money. But I'm saying to you categorically and emphatically that when you have or find yourself in financial predicament or tough financial situation, that is not the time to spend money. That is not the time to begin to lavish money. That is not the time for I cannot kill myself. that is not the time to be extravagant with money. That is actually the time you need to be cautious with your money. You need to cut your expenses. You need to block those holes that are being created in your pocket through various means, which you need to identify yourself when you actually have a budgetary plan at the end of the day. Because when you actually have a budgetary plan, you'll be able to know where your money is actually going into. You'll be able to block those leakages. You'll be able to block those things that are actually creating a hole in your pocket. And at the end of the day, you can bounce out of that financial predicament or situation you find yourself. What I'm saying here is that you don't need to reward yourself when you are broke. When you reward yourself when you are actually broke, it is actually a bad habit. It is one of the habits that makes a lot of people to be very, very broke or poor at the end of the day. Reward yourself when you are actually financially successful or when you're actually successful. So one of the habits that actually make people to be very poor in our society today is when they reward themselves even when they are actually poor. And this habit is actually a very bad habit. So reward yourself when you're actually successful. Reward yourself when you are financially independent. Reward yourself when you have what I call financial success. Another habit that makes people to be very poor in our society, which is number 4, is treating time as free and money as scarce. Time is the only asset that we cannot get more of in life, because every time that's wasted, you may not be able to recover it back at the end of the day. And that's why for those that are actually successful today, they don't joke with their time. Are you actually the type that's always procrastinating? You are always postponing. You are always elongating. You are always giving excuses. You don't see time as something that has value in life. You are making a very, very big mistake, because everything we actually accomplish in life actually deals with time. Those that actually make money today or are very successful in life, they make use of their time effectively. So that's why time, if it is wasted, you may never recover it back again. You need to be very concise. You need to be very accurate. You need to be very determined. You need to stay focused when it comes to the issue of time. Do you know that you can actually use your money to buy time? Now, a lot of people will say, what do I actually mean by using your money to buy time? Like I said earlier, time is actually something that is very, very important in life. It is cardinal, it is indispensable, it is obligatory, it's actually mandatory. It is something that can actually determine whether you are going to be rich or you are not going to be rich. In other words, you can actually buy that time. When I'm talking about the fact that you are buying time, this is what I actually mean. You could hire people that could do a lot of things for you, because when you are doing that time, those things, there's every possibility that you are going to spend more time in those things. So in other words, you can actually hire people, you can actually employ people that can do those things for you, while you actually concentrate on things that can add more value to your life. For example, you can employ people that can actually cook for you. You can employ a driver that can actually drive for you. You can do so many things that you can actually do with your time. Instead of you actually wasting time on those things, you can actually get people that can do those things for you, and you concentrate more on things that can add more value to your life. Because when you actually create time for yourself, at the end of the day, you are going to make more money. And that is the secret that wise people, rich people, wealthy people are actually using, because they hire those people that can actually do those things for them that ordinarily they could have done by themselves. While those things that can actually put more money in their pocket, they concentrate more on those things. In our contemporary time, people actually give most of their time to things that can not add any value to their life, and that's why their life is actually not changing, and that's why their life is not actually improving. You can imagine people actually spending a lot of time watching TV from morning to evening. You ask yourself, what value will that create for you at the end of the day? Watching TVs from morning till evening, is it going to add more value to you? Instead of watching that TV from morning to evening, why don't you find something that actually creates more money for you at the end of the day, that will actually create what I call a value? See, that extra time that you actually have when you hire people at the end of the day, you can use that time to also relax, or use that time to make more money. You need to avoid wasting time, because time is very, very important in life. You see, sometimes you see people actually, when they are supposed to wake up in the morning, go out there and look for money and get something doing, they are always sleeping. Sometimes, if they are not sleeping, they are always playing games. Sometimes, if they are not playing games, sometimes they are always relaxing. If they are not relaxing, I'm not saying that it's not good for you to actually relax. But what we're saying there is that there's actually time for everything in life. There's time to look for money. There's time to relax. There's time to relax. There's time to sleep. There's time for everything. So you need to prioritize your time. How do you use your time? Do you use your time for things that cannot create value for you, or things that cannot add value to your life? Or you actually use your time for things that can actually create time, that can actually create value for you, that can actually bring more money to you? And that's why you see that for the wealthy class, they are always time conscious, they are always serious in time, they are always focused on time. Everything they do in life is always all about time. If you want to make money, they need to know when to strike and when to withdraw. Number 5 habit that makes people to be very poor in our society today is being comfortable with watching movies. A lot of people are actually guilty of this scenario, because we spend more time watching movies every day. We spend an average of 3 to 4 hours every day watching movies. I am not saying it is not good to watch movies, but what I'm saying here is that there's actually time for everything. Those time you actually spend on watching movies, you can use them to do productive things. You see, a lot of us also spend a lot of money on monthly subscriptions on those media platforms that we use to watch our movies. I don't want to mention names here, but by the time I was asking a colleague of mine some time ago that how much you actually using in subscribing for your mobile phone every month, and he was mentioning, he said he uses about 5,000 naira to buy 18 to 20 gig of data for his phone. And I asked him, how long does that 18 to 20 gigs spend in your phone before you exhaust everything? And he told me it doesn't take more than 14 days. Then that means that he's going to be spending about 10,000 naira every month on his data for his phone. Apart from that, he's also spending money on his monthly subscription for what he watches in his house on his TV. Then, for example, now maybe he's spending about 10,000 naira also on that one. 10,000 naira every month plus 10,000 naira, that's 20,000 naira. Then multiply 20,000 naira by 12. That means that he's spending 240,000 naira on yearly basis on what? On monthly subscription. That is an exorbitant amount of money. That money will go a very, very long way if you actually invest that money into mutual funds or into portfolio investment. And when I'm talking about portfolio investment, I've actually mentioned so many forms of portfolio investment in all my videos. They are all there, you can watch them at the end of the day. If that money is actually converted, it will go a very, very long way. Time is very expensive in life, and you should not jeopardize that time. You should not take that time lightly. You should not be frivolous with that time. You should not be extravagant with that time. You must make use of your time judiciously and meticulously. Number 6 habits that makes people to be very poor is what I call wasteful behavior and poor prioritization. A lot of people spend a lot of money on liabilities, and when you're talking about liabilities, they spend a lot of money on cars, they spend a lot of money on housing, or apartments, they spend a lot of money on clothing, on shoes, on wristwatches, and the rest of them. But by the time you actually calculate the amount of money they spend on things that can actually build them up, you realize that it's actually lower. Now, what am I saying here? You see, Nigerians don't have what I call a reading culture. People don't read books, they only watch movies and the rest of them. And that's why a lot of us today, we are not making more money. Because when you actually read books, not ordinary books, books on management, books on wealth creation, books on personal development and the rest of them, books on businesses or things that can actually do that can add value to your life, you are going to discover that your life is going to improve. You are going to discover that you're going to have optimum efficiency. You're going to discover that your level of investment and your idea about money will change negatively. But when you don't have that prioritization for those things that can actually build your life well, or can make your life to be positive, you discover that in most cases, a lot of these people or a lot of us are going to have what we call wasteful behavior. You need to understand that it's always very easy to spend money on liabilities. It's always very easy. In fact, spending money on liability is the easiest thing to do in life, because those things are always attracting you, you're always fascinated, you're always having this impulse to buy them. You see a wristwatch, you buy it. You see an expensive car, you buy it. You want to live in an expensive apartment, you buy it, you go for it. You want to compete with your friends, but you fail to understand that you don't have the same level of income. At the end of the day, if care is not taken, you might look rich in terms of liability, but when it comes to the area of asset creation, you are nowhere to be found at the end of the day. What I'm saying here is that you should spend more money on your financial education. Another habit that actually makes people to be very poor is what I call asking for permission to get started. If you actually want to create wealth, if you actually want to have what I call financial independence, then the time for investment is actually now. You need to start immediately. You need to avoid what I call procrastination. And what do I mean by procrastination? I'm going to do it today, I'm going to do it tomorrow, I'm going to do it next week, I'm going to do it in next month, I'm going to do it in December. Before you know, at the end of the day, if care is not taken, you are not going to do anything. And that's why procrastination is not a very good thing. Procrastination will reduce our efficiency. Procrastination will reduce our productivity. Procrastination will make us to be stagnant. Procrastination will not allow you to grow up financially. So that is why if you want to start something today, if you want to start investing today, you don't need to wait for tomorrow. You need to start investing now. A lot of people also have this problem that they are always afraid of failure. If you are the type that you are actually afraid of failure, it's not a very good thing. It's called that people that are actually rich today, people that are very successful, people that are very rich today, they are the risk taker. They are the people that are not afraid of taking a risk. So you should not be afraid of taking risk, but rather you should take the bull by the horn. Because if you want to make it in life, it is not always easy. You should never be afraid of making a mistake, because mistakes are part of a learning process. So you should rather embrace the mistakes, because when you make mistakes, you are actually learning from your mistakes. If you want to become successful, if you want to be rich, if you want to be wealthy, if you want to be in abundance today, then mistakes is part of the learning process. Because in life sometimes you make some wrong mistakes, and when you make these mistakes, you actually correct yourself and you learn from your mistakes. So today, right now, or in this century, a lot of these rich people that we see today that are always flamboyant, people are discussing about them, the world is emulating them, everybody's talking about them today. A lot of them have actually make mistakes. In fact, they make 1,000 mistakes, but today the world is celebrating them. If I've actually did something in this video, then it is now time for you to subscribe to this channel, share this video, like and leave your comment on how I can actually serve you better. Till I see you next time, stop those habits that actually make you to be very poor, but rather embrace those habits that will actually make you to be very rich.